There is a specific kind of quietness that settles around us in midlife. It is not the silence of peace, but the quiet of something unfinished, or perhaps the silence that follows a long, loud period of striving. We often reach the age of 40 or 50, look around at the landscape of our lives, and find ourselves standing on ground we spent 2 decades trying to build. We acquired the career, the home, maybe the family, the measurable symbols of success that society insisted were the goals. But beneath the surface of this constructed life, there is often a profound, confusing sense of being lost. This feeling isn't usually dramatic. It is not a sudden crisis that erupts in chaos. It is slow, deep erosion. It is the realization, dawning over years, that the map we were given to navigate life led us exactly where it was supposed to, yet the destination feels empty. This is the quiet, frustration that mature adults rarely speak about openly. We remain silent because we know, logically, that we should be grateful. We have stability. We have responsibilities. We feel guilty admitting to an inner emptiness when so many people are still fighting for what we already possess. This guilt is a powerful anchor, holding us exactly where we are, reinforcing the sense of being stuck. It prevents us from seeking true clarity. The exhaustion we feel at this stage is rarely just physical tiredness. It is the exhaustion of performance. For years, we have been acting the part of the successful professional, the supportive partner, the engaged parent. We have worn multiple masks, sometimes simultaneously, and the effort required to maintain these facades, to keep the structure standing, drains our core energy. We are tired not from what we are doing, but from why we are doing it, and for whom. We begin to sense that we are running on fumes, using motivation that was set by someone else's definition of a good life. This is the central psychological conflict of midlife, the shift from extrinsic value to intrinsic meaning. In our 20s and 30s, we were driven by extrinsic rewards, promotions, salary increases, public validation, milestones hit. These were clear, measurable, and highly motivating. But around 40, the psychological currency changes. The next promotion doesn't excite us the way the last one did. The raise simply means more taxes and a slightly bigger maintenance bill on the house we already feel trapped in. The external rewards suddenly lose their power to sustain us. What we crave now is meaning. We need to feel that our actions are connected to something deeper than just the maintenance of our own economic unit. But because we have spent so much time chasing the external, the internal landscape feels unfamiliar, overgrown, and scary to explore. We feel lost because the compass that guided us for the first half of the journey has stopped working, and we haven't learned how to read the stars. The disappointment is silent because it often focuses inward. It is the disappointment with the person we became while striving for the goals. We look back and realize how much essential self we compromised, how many small, true desires we dismissed as impractical noise. Maybe we always wanted to work with our hands, or spend more time studying history, or simply have fewer things to manage. But the inertia of the established life is enormous. The routine, which was once a comfort and a necessity for structure, now feels like a cage. We wake up, and the path is already laid out. The same commute, the same necessary conversations, the same bills arriving on the same day. This predictability, while safe, can be profoundly suffocating to the spirit. We become highly efficient machines, but the human being inside the machine starts to atrophy from disuse. When we feel lost, it is often a sign that our identity has become too tightly bound to these external roles. We are the executive, or the provider, or the parent of X. If those roles were suddenly removed, if the job vanished, or the children left home, who would we be? This fear of the blank slate, the anxiety of self-definition outside of our utility to others, keeps us clinging to the very routines that are draining us. This crisis of identity is compounded by physical reality. We are no longer 25 with boundless energy and the illusion of infinite time. We are now acutely aware of limitations. We see the passage of time reflected not just in the mirror, but in the aging of our parents and the growing independence of our children. This is the moment we fully absorb the fact that life is finite, and the energy we have left must be spent differently, more carefully. But how do we shift gears when the machine we built is so large and requires so much momentum just to stay operational? We begin to experience internal conflicts that are almost impossible to verbalize. One part of us yearns for radical simplification, to sell everything, move somewhere quiet, and start over with only the essentials. Another part is terrified of destabilizing the comfort and security we worked so hard to achieve, particularly for the sake of those we love. This tension between liberation and responsibility is constant. It manifests as irritability, as an inability to focus, and as a general, low-grade sense of dissatisfaction that colors every interaction. In our relationships, especially long-term partnerships, the feeling of being lost can lead to an unnerving distance. We look across the table at the person we built this life with, and realize that both of you have changed, but perhaps in diverging directions. The goals that united you 15 years ago, buying the house, raising the kids, achieving financial stability, are either complete or well underway. Now the question is, what is the next thing that binds us? Often, partners are hitting their psychological midlife shifts at slightly different times. One may be ready to simplify and withdraw, while the other is suddenly desperate for new external excitement to prove they are still capable or relevant. This difference in pace creates friction. We stop seeing the person and start only seeing the opposing force to our own internal desires. The lost feeling becomes shared, even if unspoken, and silence becomes the default language of the marriage. To address this, we must first recognize that feeling lost is not failure. It is simply a signal. It is the deep self telling the functional, performing self that the current path is unsustainable. It is a necessary psychological reset button, often disguised as disappointment. The first step toward clarity is not to dismantle the external life immediately, but to create protected internal space. We need to reintroduce silence and solitude, not as an escape from responsibility, but as a commitment to self-maintenance. When the world is loud and our schedule is full, we cannot hear the true internal voice that knows what is missing. We must allow the silence to reveal the frustration, to acknowledge the disappointment, and to identify the hidden resentments that have accumulated over years of prioritizing external demands. We must conduct an honest audit of where our time and energy truly go. It's often revealed that 80% of our effort is spent supporting things we no longer care about, or maintaining relationships that are transactional rather than nourishing. This audit is painful because it demands that we confront the choices we made and recognize that some of those choices, while logical at the time, are now heavy burdens. The psychological work of midlife is the slow, deliberate work of separating our worth from our output. For decades, the equation was simple: work hard, achieve results, feel worthy. Now, we must dismantle that equation. Worth is inherent, not earned through perpetual striving. This requires redefining success itself. Success at 45 is not about adding more. It is about subtraction. It is about identifying the non-negotiables, the few activities, people, and commitments that truly align with our rediscovered purpose, and letting everything else go, regardless of what others might think. This is where the fear returns, because letting go often involves disappointing people who have come to rely on our previous level of output and availability. True clarity without illusion means accepting that the second half of life will not be a sudden burst of thrilling freedom. It will be characterized by sustained, mindful effort toward authenticity. We are trading the illusion of limitless excitement for the depth of profound meaning. Meaning is found in the small acts of integrity. It is found in doing the necessary tasks with presence, rather than rushing through them to get to a mythical future point of happiness. If we hate our work, but cannot leave it immediately due to financial reality, the shift is not in quitting the job, but in choosing how we show up. Can we find a small corner of our existing role where we can exercise true skill or help someone genuinely, rather than just meeting the metric? Can we stop allowing the job to define us entirely and instead see it as a limited contract that funds our true life? The exploration of purpose after 40 is usually a return, not a discovery. When we feel lost, the answer is rarely a brand new, radically different path. Ipun Muaid is often about retrieving the essence of who we were before the machine took over. What did we love to do as a teenager, before ambition corrupted the pure joy of creation or learning? What topics fascinated us before they became professional subjects? This retrieval requires psychological courage, because those old passions often feel embarrassing or childish when viewed through the lens of a mature, successful adult. We must permit ourselves to be novices again, to fail publicly at something new, and to invest time in endeavors that have zero return on investment, except for the internal satisfaction they provide. Acceptance in this stage is crucial, but it must be acceptance without resignation. Resignation says, "This is my life now. I must endure it." Acceptance says, "This is the reality I have created, and I accept the effort required to slowly reshape it." It means accepting the limits of our energy, the reality of our commitments, and the necessity of patience. Change at this age is often tectonic. It moves slowly beneath the surface, building pressure until a new shape emerges. It is rarely volcanic. We must dismantle the fantasy of the sudden, liberating break. The feeling of being lost is a psychological invitation to integrate all parts of ourselves: the dutiful self, the ambitious self, and the silenced, soulful self. Integration is messy and requires compromise, but it leads to a grounded identity that is far more resilient than the identity built on external roles. Part of this integration involves confronting the narrative of disappointment. If we are frustrated because life didn't deliver the perfect spouse, the perfect career, or the perfect inner peace, we must scrutinize the source of that expectation. Often the disappointment is not with our actual life, but with the imagined, optimized life, constantly projected by culture. Clarity means recognizing that struggle and complexity are not deviations from the normal path. They are the path itself. When we stop fighting the reality of our current situation and start working with its constraints, the overwhelming pressure begins to lift. If financial constraints are keeping us in a certain job, the focus shifts from "how do I escape" to "how do I manage this necessity gracefully while building an exit strategy on the side?" This tactical, realistic approach is the mature response to feeling lost. It replaces emotional panic with strategic patience. We also have to reevaluate our relationship with time. For the young, time is an infinite resource to be spent lavishly. For us, time is the ultimate non-renewable asset. We must become ruthless protectors of our time, treating commitments that drain us not just as annoying, but as direct threats to our well-being and purpose. This means saying no to requests that do not align with our deeply held values, even when those requests come from people we love or respect. This is not selfishness, it is psychological survival. The psychological shift in midlife also requires us to move away from comparison. We have spent the first half of life measuring ourselves against peers who got promoted faster, who bought the bigger house, whose children achieved more. But once we are past the initial striving phase, comparison becomes a poison that destroys the possibility of internal contentment. Everyone is fighting their own silent internal battle, often while presenting a polished, successful exterior. When we feel lost, Looking at someone else's highlight reel only reinforces our sense of failure. True clarity comes from turning the focus inward entirely, measuring success not by external markers, but by congruence, the alignment between what we say we value and how we actually spend our day. If we say we value family, but spend 60 hours a week at the office, the feeling of being lost is the internal alarm demanding alignment. This process is slow, often frustrating, and involves psychological excavation. We are digging up old beliefs, old loyalties, and old wounds that have been buried under layers of work and activity. When we feel lost, the most important thing is to resist the urge to fill the emptiness with noise, distraction, or new, expensive hobbies. The emptiness is the space where the new self must be built, and construction requires quiet focus. The deep psychological task of life after 40 is to move from being driven by external expectations to being led by internal conviction. This conviction is earned through hard self-reflection, not handed down by a life coach or a book. It is about understanding what truly sustains us, not what temporarily excites us. It is about discovering the things we would still do, even if no one else was watching, and there was no possible profit to be gained. Ultimately, the feeling of being lost is a phase, a transition point. It signals that the previous structure is complete, but the blueprints for the next phase have not yet been drawn. We are standing between two identities. The old one is dying, and the new one is not yet born. This intermediate state is inherently uncomfortable, full of ambiguity and anxiety. The mature approach is to treat this ambiguity not as a problem to be solved immediately, but as a necessary phase to be patiently navigated. We allow ourselves to sit in the fog, trusting that by committing to internal honesty and small deliberate actions, the clarity will eventually emerge, defined not by grand ambition, but by quiet, authentic purpose. This clarity will be solid, sustainable, and entirely our own,